Good morning. I am so happy that you have joined us today. I am Nancy Malling, president of the New Canaan Beautification League. Today's program will inspire us as we look forward to warmer spring days ahead. I want to thank Ann Flynn, our master gardener and program committee member, for bringing this noted landscape designer for today's presentation. Without further ado, Ann.
Good morning. I am pleased to introduce Edwina von Gal, distinguished landscape designer and founder of the Perfect Earth Project. Today, she will talk about the future perfect gardening in a changing world. We will have a brief time following her presentation for Q&A. Please place your questions in the Q&A during the presentation so that we can group them and address those questions. Over the course of Edwina's successful landscape design career, she has been a leading voice in sustainable landscapes and design. She founded Perfect Earth Project in 2013 to promote ecological and land care practices. She has collaborated with internationally known architects such as Frank Gehry, Maya Lin, Richard Meyer, to name a few, and is the recipient of many awards, including the following: the New York School of Interior Design's Green Award, the Isamu Noguchi Award, and the Guildhall's Academy of the Arts Lifetime Achievement Award for the Visual Arts. In 2024, she was named one of the top 50 creatives in America by Wallpaper magazine. Beginning with the Azuero Earth Project in Panama in 2012, Edwina's work has evolved from English-style gardens toward ecological designs that emphasize the beauty of native plants, biodiversity, and sustainable, toxic-free practices. Today, one of her principal goals is to change the way we look at gardens, celebrating landscapes that work with and not against nature. She sparkles, and she has much to teach us. We're looking forward to learning from your expertise, Edwina. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. So, shall I get started? Let's see. Going to share the screen. And is that working?
Yes.
Great. All right. So, yes. What are we going to do as the world becomes a little bit more uncertain and everything has changed in the way we look at it? So I've changed a lot during my time as a landscape designer, because as you mentioned, I started out doing just what was the style of the day. Anything that was the new plant, the harder to grow, the better. And that I'm just not there anymore. So I live in a place that, whoopsie, let me see if I can figure out why this is not going. There we go. I live here. This is my backyard. I'm not allowed to touch it. It's a salt marsh, which makes it very restful. But it also it informs me, because basically what nature does works the best. She's really established everything that is now well, historically, this is what we consider beautiful. Nature wrote the book on beauty and on sustainability. What can we learn from her now as our systems begin to show, fault lines, cracks? And so I'm looking out, you can see there in the distance off to the right is an osprey nest. And oopsie, that's the wrong direction. There we go. I owe these ospreys to Rachel Carson, right? They were disappearing. She wrote her book Silent Spring, and DDT was banned, and we thought, done. We're done. Everything is fabulous. That nature's back, happy again. We've got things returning. The ospreys are back, but we didn't really work that way. we now have a lot of new challenges. We're losing our biodiversity at a rather rapid rate. It's increasing. So one of the scary things is the loss of birds. So we've lost about a third of our native birds just in the last 50 years. Most of the surprising thing is that the most rapid declines are in our common birds, our backyard birds. These are the birds that share habitat with us. And so wherever we go, we basically remove their habitat because we remove their food. Bird feeders don't really make up the difference. So this is the big problem with the loss of biodiversity. And, nobody's really ever been able to measure exactly why biodiversity is critical to us. But I think one of the things that we don't do, and we have a really hard time doing, myself included, is to see myself as just another organism. And the web of life is intricate and intertwined. And if I'm just one of those organisms that's completely supported by all the other organisms, they're going to be important to me. So what are the two key components that have been identified as the reasons for our loss of biodiversity? One is loss of habitat. The other one is use of pesticides. So loss of habitat, pretty obvious. Where's anything going to live here but a human? This is idealized for human life, minimized for all other life forms. And then, of course, we all know about this. So what's behind all of this? Well, to my mind, one of the reasons that people are lost perspective about creating anything in their yards that looks like a place for something else to live is that even it starts in our homes. So this is, I call it the race to erase. We're making our living rooms dead rooms because everybody wants, when somebody enters their home, to make their living room like nothing lives there. Like you don't live there. There's no sign of life. Most people who don't garden, they're not us. They want to do the same with their landscape because they don't know how else to talk to their landscaper. They don't know what to ask for. So they tend to ask for something that looks like a living room. So here's kind of the aspirational landscape. It looks like a living room. There is no room for mess on the carpet. You can't have this in your living room, right? So you can't have it in your landscape. And you certainly can't have anything messing up the look of your perfect rug, even if it's adorable. And nobody wants to do it by hand anymore. So back to that adorable landscape, what is this? This is the new look of the landscape industry. So basically it's come to be designed, and it has become actually willfully and intentionally designed for you, the owner of this landscape, to provide work for the caregiver, the landscaper, forever. Because what happens if you ever stop clipping those trees? It's a cascading effect. The hedges below and behind, the plants below are going to be shaded out. The trees, it's going to change the look of the place. What happens if any of this is left to itself? The garden will change. And the idea of this gardening changes is anathema to the design of the garden. So what have we got now but this landscape industry that is designed to keep you a client forever? So they will, and it's all transactional. So you water and fertilize, that's the irrigation company, the guys doing fertilization and deep root feeding and all of that. So you get a lot of growth. Everybody thinks, well, you did a great job. Look at how my things are growing. But that soft new growth, usually stimulated a bit too early in the season, attracts predators because predators love soft new growth. Then you have to go in and kill those predators with pesticides. You also have to prune off the excess growth because, as you could see, it's going to shade out or change the look of your frozen in time landscape. All of that excess growth is then sent to the landfill. Our landfills are bulging with what would be otherwise good for your landscape. And then to fill in those gaps, you water and fertilize some more, and you keep doing this forever. This is the look of our landscapers now. There's nothing here that is about caring for plants. It's all about controlling. It's about noise and poison. That's our landscape world now. There is nothing in there that feeds our birds. Where are the insects for our birds? 90% of our songbirds and our backyard birds require insects, particularly caterpillars, to feed their young. They cannot have a nest of young without them, so that is part of the precipitous decline of our backyard birds. But these pesticides and poor management practices have other implications as well, not great for our water bodies. And so where does this all come from? It's not good for us either. So we've been told, as you can see, like through the years, that these new sophisticated chemicals won't hurt us because they're only designed to kill pests. So they're designed to kill bacteria, fungi, microorganisms, little insects, all microscopic. You know what? We now know about our biome. We're 10 times more biome than we are human cells. Insecticides, pesticides kill all those biome organisms. So our bodies are being assaulted by these new, very sophisticated chemicals that aren't supposed to hurt us. And so I took this from a lawn care proposal that one of my clients was given. These are all largely known to be, they're known carcinogens and they're known endocrine disruptors. And they're on the lawn. And so there is something we can do. It's a very simple thing. We can just make this choice that I'm not going to do that. But it does require that you step into it and that you accept certain changes. Your landscape will not be fixed in time. It should be allowed to grow. It should be responding to time, and it should be responding to nature. So there's two very simple principles that we ask everybody to follow. Do your best to reduce harm. So you have to recognize what's harmful first, and increase biodiversity. And so I'm going to try through this to thread in, because I know you're all involved in the beauty of New Canaan. And so some of these ideas are kind of out there, but I always like to push the envelope, because those are the things that actually people remember. It doesn't mean you're going to literally do them yourself, translate them to what you're doing, but it means you're going to kind of use them as like this long-term, maybe kind of inspirational, wacky goal that maybe someday might in some way be reinterpreted for what you are doing. So, but the one thing I do ask is that you really stick with making a commitment to no pesticides, because this is the recipient of the harm, and if you kill this with this, like you see bugs, you see something chewing on your leaf, and you call this guy, and then this is what is this chickadee going to do? As Doug Tallamy says, a chickadee needs about 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise one nest of young. Those caterpillars need to be at max a quarter mile away. Are they in your yard? And that chickadee should, in order to get our bird population back on track, that chickadee should be raising 2 to 3 nests of young every season. It's a lot of caterpillars. So I walked out my door and I said, let's see if, what might be, nothing eats anything. I don't see anything. And then I walked out the door, and here I found my red maple with obvious signs of herbivory. And I remembered that there is this thing called the 10-step program. So if you have something eating your leaves, take 10 steps back. Probably the problem is solved. You can't see it anymore. And so the other part of this is like, do you know what this is before you kill it? If you saw this, would it frighten you? Would you assume that this was a really bug that you needed to kill? But the fact is, many of you may already know that this is the larval form of a ladybug, and both in its larval form and its adult form, it's a voracious consumer of aphids. So a lot can happen in the time between you might have sprayed and the time that the actual predators show up. So there's a saying in the world of that you don't have a pest problem, you have a predator problem. So what you really want to do is wait for predators to show up. Predators aren't going to show up until there's really enough of a meal there for them to eat, to recognize, and for them to eat. So what you want to do, even dandelions can play a role. The other thing is, everybody now, the first thing people say is, what about ticks? What about ticks? Tick sprays, even the ones that are listed as organic, will kill this pollinating bee. If you go out, because just think about it, rosemary oil on that bee or on a butterfly or on a caterpillar, it really can't tolerate that. There is no proof that the Carey Institute for Ecosystem Studies did a 5-year test, the Tick Project, in which they looked at properties that were sprayed, properties that were not sprayed. There was absolutely no difference in the incidence of tick-borne diseases between the properties that were sprayed and the properties that were not sprayed. Actually, a slight difference. Pets showed a slight improvement, but people don't stay home all the time, and they get a whole lot less vigilant. If they're spraying their property, they think it's done. They're also listening to the pet spray guys who are actually making a living by selling spray. So the pay is in the spray. They're going to tell you it's harmless. It depends on harmless to whom. So the tick sprays are causing an incredible collapse of our natural pollinators and biodiversity. And do I have an answer? No. What does the Carey Institute recommend? Well, deal with the manageable real estate, which is you. You're the target. Spray yourself, check yourself. That is actually the only proven way to protect yourself from tick-borne diseases. And another use of pesticides. So the word pesticide actually covers all things that kill pests. So that includes insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, all the sides. And so to my mind, there is actually no time when the use of a pesticide is justified. So what can you do? So there is a good deal of conversation in the world of creating meadows that you can start the meadow by spraying it with Roundup or a glyphosate product, and that it's justified because, well, I'm not really sure. There's all kinds of dancing around that subject, why it's justified. Is it because you're in a hurry? Nature doesn't work that way. Why not enjoy the process? Like, what's wrong with it? Do you want your family delivered, like fully grown and then never changing? It's the process in gardening. What would we do as gardeners if everything was done? So my idea is go find the natural solution. A lot of people are working on it. It's a whole lot more interesting to work naturally through the process. I'm not sure why this is not. Oh, there we go. The largest use of Roundup or glyphosates in the residential landscape is for driveways and patios, because basically you're not generally in the process of killing off your flower beds with Roundup, but people do use it to kill weeds in their driveway. But what if your tires did the job instead? Wrong direction. So the other harm we all tend to do a lot of to our landscape is cutting our plants. Can you plant so plants have the opportunity to grow naturally and just develop their own shape? Like, why would you take a perfectly lovely tree and turn it into a ball? Because it's a job. I don't really know. Maybe people can better identify their plants if they call them round and square. But that's really become a tremendous industry. And not only that, when people chop back their plants, they're removing their fruiting bodies in most cases. And this is what your birds need to get through the winter. So another way to reduce harm is to protect your natural resources. And that is soil, water, air. And the way to do that is, as a goal, this might be a little bit harder to do in public landscape, but not really, is closing the loop. Nothing leaves your property, nothing enters, except, of course, more plants. So how does that work? Number one, mulch mowing. This should be done everywhere, every public park, every lawn, everywhere. There is no good reason to take the grass clippings away. They are the food that your lawn made for itself. Let them go back into the lawn. It does help if you have a mulch mower because it chops them up fine. Just don't irrigate before you mow. Very seldom is there any conversation between the mow guys and the watering guys. So, but so that nobody thinks to coordinate the irrigation schedule with the mowing schedule, because if you mow wet grass, you're going to get big slimy lumps all over the place, no question about it. If you mow dry grass and you mulch mow it, those clippings will be gone by the next day. I do it myself. I do it in all my projects. If there is some in a spot where you absolutely are determined to go right after mowing, yeah, you can rake or blow those areas, but the rest you should leave. It's more than half the amount of nitrogen that your lawn needs to thrive. And the other way for keeping all your biomass, think of inventive ways to use what you've got. So when I cut my meadow, once a year I cut my meadow, and I was carrying all of those clippings over to a compost heap because I like to keep it lean. That slows the succession down. But then I decided, what if I did a Monet moment and I just made a haystack with that hay? And what all the trees that were dead when I bought my property, because it was completely covered with bittersweet and Rosa multiflora. So it was just like constant me chopping things back, and I ended up with a lot of stuff. So I made log walls until I could to grow there, and then they're little by little being replaced by thickets. And another way to deal with excess biomass is what they do at Great Dixter, is build these incredibly beautiful piles, which also act as places for habitat for birds. And at Garden in the Woods, the Native Plant Trust, they brought an artist in to help them decide, because they're a public garden, what do we do with our excess, all the twigs and things that fall down. And so they have a kind of a volunteer day now where everybody comes in and does really artful projects with their excess biomass. And then I have a bunch of black cherry trees, and they're notoriously kind of what I guess people would call messy. They're always dropping twigs. So I started just arranging them under the trees, because I walk by every day on my way to my office, and I put them in this shape. And then I realized that every day I go by, I have my little dog with me, and there was a wren that was always in that tree. And when she saw us, she would jump into this pile of twigs for safety. So I named it the wren tent, and she's in there hopping around, and it's just the right size for her wings. And so now I build wren tents everywhere, or recommend it to others. So the other thing another thing you can do with your biomass is chip it up, but then you end up with mulch. And mulch is a good and a bad thing. So mulch is supposed to be good when it protects trees from weed whackers, but then it's not good when you're heaping it up and then adding insult to a tree, because this smothers a tree. And you can see a vertical crack in this tree trunk. That's an indication of a tree that has been buried and is worried about getting enough oxygen. These trees, this toilet plunger look that is happening all over now is really the result of the fact that clients see it on somebody's property, because I finally figured it out from the landscapers. It's like, why are you doing this? Why is this proliferating? And they said, well, we sell X amount of mulch to our clients, and then we have to use it all up on the job because they bought it. And we don't want to go back we don't want it left over in our truck. So we just heap it around trees when we're done. And then the neighbors see it and they ask for it, because it's their only criteria. It's part of the living dead room kind of thing. It's like, oh, I could tell my landscaper came and they did their job, but it's not a good job. So what if you did this instead? Phlox divaricata. And this is a whole new conversation now about the idea of soft landings, that putting plants under trees that were evolved to be under a tree. So when the leaves fall out of the tree, the soft landing part is that there's a whole biome and often a lot of life living under the leaves, mostly moths and other kinds of insects. So they can fall into this soft cushion and complete their entire life cycle and hatch in the spring, and it doesn't hurt the Phlox variegata. So here's another example of well-intended mulching. People think that it will suppress weeds. It will suppress weeds, but it'll also suppress the plants that you want to grow together. So if you can't afford to fill all the spaces in your garden, for the time being, make a smaller garden. It should look like this, no mulch. Another way to help biodiversity is, of course, do what you can to provide habitat everywhere you're going. So what is habitat? Food, shelter, and water. So food, obvious. You know, one of my favorite plants, elderberry, unfortunately, much beloved by deer. So I do encourage people to have at least part of their property that is protected from deer, so you can protect our precious native plants that are losing ground to deer browse. And so you would think that another example of, like, you know, the classic desirable American garden, there's nothing here for anything to eat. The hydrangeas are sterile, no pollen or nectar. The boxwoods are foreign, there's nothing here. And the lawn is suspiciously free of broadleaf. So probably broadleaf killers on this lawn. And they're very bad for you. Endocrine disruptors, nervous system problems. How about this instead? Yes, difference is your landscaper actually has to know plants, not arrive with a pesticide applicator license, but with the knowledge of native plants. So when people say, well, what do I offer my landscaper in, you know, as an alternative, because they're going to lose money if I tell them to stop doing all of that, I say, get them to start planting plants, get them to learn plants, help them learn plants, help them plant the right plants. And you could go this far. So this is a friend of mine. We just took out her entire front yard. And it is so fabulous. It is so full of life. And this now, the exciting thing is that this whole movement is actually almost being originally inspired by our public parks. This is Brooklyn Bridge Park. You can see the bridge in the background. This would have in the past been considered, you know, the area that they forgot to weed, that they didn't get to yet. And instead, this is the area that is celebrated. This is where the butterflies and bees are. This is what they're doing. And they're setting this example for the public. So every public space can set this example for their public, but you got to make it beautiful. And so here's an example of what, you know, the king of it all, Pete Outolf, does, because it's year-round, the beauty and what you're offering to your habitat as habitat. The food goes on and on. So gardens that are chopped back to the ground for the winter, just all of this incredible beauty and food has simply been sent probably to the landfill. So shelter is also part of that. You can see that there'll be plenty of places for insects and birds to overwinter in that out-off landscape. But also here is another version one year of my haystack, and somehow something over the winter moved in. I never figured out what it was. But here's another wonderful example from Chanticleer of a habitat pile. I don't think they're a public garden. I don't see any reason why it can't be a great volunteer activity to actually keep your biomass in place. The other thing that habitat piles do really well, and I use my haystacks for, is smothering. So if I have a patch of mugwort coming up, that's where my haystack's going to go for that year. And within the next year or so, there's nothing left but wonderful compost at the bottom of that pile. And the other habitat, so we all know bird boxes, and I totally suggest that everybody put bird boxes everywhere, but also think about always think about, what did nature do before there were humans? Weren't trees just fine without pruning and fertilizing? And what did cavity nesting birds do? Well, they lived in trees, but they were dead trees because the woodpeckers would come first and peck them open, and then the chickadees and other cavity nesters could move in. And so, do you have a place in your landscape for a dead tree, which is known as a snag? You can cut the branches off, but they fall off little by little. As long as it's not over your bedroom or your car, they're really just great. And when it gets maybe a little bit unsteady, I just push it over in the direction where I want it to fall, and then it slowly decomposes, and another whole wonderful world of mosses and things happens. And, in terms of bird boxes, if you can have a bird box park here, you can pretty much have one anywhere. And then there's all the other life forms that you can create habitat for. This is an amazing gardener in England named John Little, and habitat is his thing. He's bringing habitat into urban spaces and engaging underserved neighborhoods in tiny places in their otherwise wasteland of their landscapes, and bringing back things that he does with just all found objects. And so he gets kids to come. The drill holes are sized to particular native bees, and they create these beautiful snags by just finding an old piece of wood and sticking it in the ground and decorating it with holes. He has another version if you want to be a little bit more like finished and industrial, which is it's all found objects. You could create your own. He also makes these beautiful bee hives that are bee homes, bee castles. This is a wonderful project you can do for a public space. Plus, you have an educational opportunity. It doesn't need to be this slick. You can make it yourself. And the other thing that the last level of recycling everything on my property is to chip things. Or when I run out of chips, I ask my tree guys to drop some off because they have to pay to get rid of them. So they're more than happy to give me some for free. And one day I was walking out of my house and I used these wood chips on the areas where my grass doesn't grow very well. So as my trees grow in, there are areas that are just starting to fade in terms of keeping the grass alive. And so I've been covering them with wood chips. And then one day this stinking horn just popped out as an incredible gift, because these are all the life forms that you can promote if you're not using fungicides, if you're not using herbicides, if you're not using insecticides. Amazing surprises will come your way. And in addition, I don't know about you, but here on Eastern Long Island, well, just about everywhere I go, we have vole problems, right? So back to the idea that if you have a pest problem, it may very well be a predator problem. So I figured out that my gardener guys, they're from Latin America. So I work in Panama, and I know that in Latin America, there's a lot of really poisonous snakes. So they're trained to kill snakes on site. And one day I realized they were killing my snakes. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. We don't have any dangerous snakes here. So we have to change this dialogue. So we built a hibernaculum. They built the hibernaculum, which is a home for snakes. I never dare put a video into my presentations because they always fail. But they came to me with a video that they took of a snake entering this adorable little house that they made for them. And the other part of your biodiversity enhancement is add water. So it's just easy to do a bird bath. The only criteria for a successful bird bath is, of course, you have to keep the water fresh. And that little goldfinch that you see there would show up every day when the light was just at this certain place. And so you can see that, he's not going to swim. He's not a duck. So it has to be shallow and there has to be footing. So make sure that a bird bath is not terribly slippery and it's not terribly deep. So even shorter legs and less capacity for swimming also needs water is bees. So I do these things I call bee beaches, and the bee beaches has a little slight dripping water. So it's the only place in my garden that really gets a lot of additional water. So I can grow things. This is actually at a client's house. And so things just seeded in. Verbena hastata, which loves water, things that just happened. And the bees can just walk up to that. They could also gather mud for the mud nesting bees. And there's opportunity for wasps, all kinds of life. And if you have a spot, you can always build a little pond, which I finally got my dream come true. It's lined with clay. No plastic goes in the ground. Not because clay allows the roots of all the plants to grow right through. And within one season, it was filled with incredible amounts of life. Of course, I didn't have to water. And so it's basically self-stabilized in almost no time. It's filled with all kinds of aquatic life. Turtles showed up. Of course, I have dragonflies, which eat the mosquitoes, and marsh marigolds have thrived. It's pretty darned amazing. And it's really not that big. And so then lawns, what are lawns good for? Lawns are good for recreation. I do not hate lawns at all. I just don't like the fact of what they've come to symbolize, which is an idea of domination and heavy use of pesticides and fertilizers. So why not allow clover in your lawn? Clover is nitrogen fixing, but clover has been the object of a very major marketing campaign on the part of the people who sell the broadleaf killers. And so you've been told clover is bad. Clover is great. You could rethink, like, do I need lawn at all? Because this is Manitoba, one of my most favorite places in the world in terms of how could a house be more perfectly integrated into an extraordinary place. So if you haven't ever been there, it's outside of Garrison on the Hudson River. I strongly urge you to go because it is extraordinary. And they have a wonderful head gardener named Emily, and she will show you around. They do not use chemicals, needless to say, and it's the most extraordinary place. But you really don't need to have lawn except for those few patches where you're going to recreate. Most people do not recreate in their front yard. So there are all these new low mow grasses that you could play with, or you could just put in the kind of native plants that are very robust, like Matutia, the ostrich fern, and bayberries, and the deer don't tend to eat them. And so just reduce your lawn to your paths or your small recreational areas. This is a house I did for a client in the Hudson Valley. This is talking about the way you see things, and how you can tell they were not exactly nature people. These houses are sealed boxes. He had bad allergies and everything, and they weren't going outside. But they had this extraordinary piece of land. So basically, they don't even touch the ground when they go from place to place. But those walkways are elevated, so all of the wildlife, all of the nature can pass beneath them, the water, everything. So basically, the houses do not interrupt the flow of nature. And all of the plants I used on the project, I took the palette from the surrounding wood. So there's nothing there that isn't 100% seamless, and completely happy to be there, requiring almost nothing. And the other way is, like, there's a thing called cues to care is a catchphrase that's going around in horticulture now. Is like, how can you put something out there? So if people are complaining that your front yard looks messy or your native plantings look messy, it is a somewhat perception thing. Some of them do look messy. I, of course, hope that everybody will learn over time to make them look not messy. But you can also put a little intervention in that shows it was intentional. So you can mow a strip around it, mow a frame and call it art, mow a little patch in there that says, yeah, I didn't just do nothing. I care. This is intentional. And there's a little place for my grandson to play. But I did do a pool for people that they thought, they wanted a pool in their lawn. And I said, well, you have this incredible meadow all around. Why don't we instead of increasing the lawn for the pool, let's bring the meadow in right around the pool. And it's pretty magical. And they don't have to do anything. Once a year, it gets cut. So where do you look for your beauty inspiration? It all comes from nature. Nature doesn't do ugly. And so can you always look and think, well, what would nature do in this case? Because generally I go out into nature. This is a place behind a local natural history museum. I go out into nature and I get my inspiration there from what are the grasses? Like, how about this Ilex verticillata? You know, incredible. And what could be better? Like, would people say, well, my landscape looks ugly in the winter? It really does not need to. And so this was my backyard, which was an old, when I bought the house, it was mowed as lawn. Happily, they had never, I would say probably never used chemicals because the lawn was, you know, just a pretty ragtag. And when I stopped mowing, it all came back naturally. And then I did add these Nissus sylvaticus because I thought, because they were in other places in the area. But these grasses, this is panicums and little blue stem, they all came up naturally. So if you know what they are, that's the thing. Can we educate our professional land care population, community, to know what these plants are and let them come up? How do you weed the other way around? Take out the stuff that isn't native and keep what is, because it will thrive and it'll attract all manner of incredible life. So, but this is the part of my landscape that I actually do take a part in. So there's some natives, mostly natives here, but not entirely all. You can see some corn stalks that I used to screen in the back. Petrinia in the front is not native, but the umbels, as Fergus from Great Dixter says, alliums and umbels, because you know they did a biodiversity audit and found that their landscape, which was not native plant based, has the highest level of biodiversity in just about all of England. So England does not have a strong focus on native plants. And it was an interesting thing for me to go around and talk to the gardeners there because I was curious about that. And it's really about how about we focus on plants that ask almost nothing, give everything. So what are those plants? In our vocabulary, they're very often native plants. They do not need fertilizing. If chosen, right plant, right place, if they're chosen for your place, they should not need fertilizing. They should not need watering once they're established. They shouldn't need staking if you grow them all together and they hold each other up. And they will give so much. And so this is also, so this whole vocabulary is starting to appear in the public sector. This is the front of the Brooklyn Museum. This is, of course, the High Line. This is Penn State, where Claudia West has done an amazing pollinator garden, and they're studying it intensively. But really, this is not hard to do. You know, it's a whole lot of Monarda, you know, so very resilient plants that really deliver. So what if we just didn't do this and we just let this happen? What if we celebrated the herbivory, the nibbled leaf? Because when something's nibbling your leaves, it's actually not even cutting into the wood. It's chewing around the edges. Your plant is happy because they evolved together. A plant can give up 10 to 20% of its leaf surface every single year. It evolved to do that. So think about sharing your yard generously with nature. Thanks very much. And so, yes, please sign up for we have wonderful newsletters. They will not clog your inbox. We have great publications that you can download for free. And we do workshops with everyone. Either we organize it from afar or come in person to do what we call landscape therapy, in which we ask everybody to take a close look at what your relationship is with your land. Are you helping it or hindering it to be its very best? So thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Edwina. That was an absolutely wonderful, illuminating presentation. And we have several questions to address.
Great.
If I may begin with a question which from Angela Materna. Uh, are you seeing any meaningful acceleration in adopting these sustainable practices with native plants and a move away from chemicals as the native plants are used more heavily? Is that happening?
It's happening. The problem is the demand is exceeding the supply. So in other words, people are not able to get accessible, great information unless they're, already a highly educated gardener. So Perfect Earth is addressing that because basically we get to a point with everyone and then they say, oh, great, but who do I hire? And unfortunately, we have like two people who are highly overworked in any given location. So we are starting a land care professional training program here on the East End this summer. And hopefully it is the model that we will be able to replicate all over the place so we can start training people who want to do something good on the earth. Because I have actually given up trying to get the landscaping profession, the conventional landscaping world to adopt these practices. They're simply not interested. They have a business model and it's solid. And so we're going to start our own new training methods, start people out from scratch. Obviously, we will have courses that anyone can attend, but there would be so many more people doing this if they were getting good education, good information.
That is a really heartening and encouraging project. It's another extension of Perfect Earth, I understand. And it's also heartening to hear that the demand for native plants is exceeding supply. Are the nurseries, the designers like yourself, others, management of public spaces, are you seeing changes there as well? You gave us some nice examples. And I'm just wondering who's leading the way?
Oh, the places that I showed you are tending to lead the way. And I just did the keynote for the Metro Hort Group in New York City. And it's counterintuitive, but the best horticulture is now happening in urban spaces. And we think that's because the leaders are some of the parks. So the Highline really started the conversation because they had the money and they were using a natural palette as inspired by the original beauty of the Highline as a wild space in the city. And that's really caught on. And then Brooklyn Bridge Park. And so some of the really the innovators are doing it, and it takes a while to trickle down. Unfortunately, climate change isn't slowing down, it's speeding up. So we've got to speed up. But yes, there's a lot of interest. I just think that as decision makers, the people who actually, hire the people who do the work, we all need to be specific and actually, pretty firm about this is what I want. And if your land care professional tells you it's not going to work and it's going to cost more, you give them two options. We don't want to fire anybody, but they have two options. One is, here's the materials. We'll work with Perfect Earth. They have it all. We have a book, we have everything. You can learn. We have for you what we call landscape language. This is what you absolutely say. This is how we're going to do it. And I'll be with you. We'll learn as we go. I will not fire you as long as you make an absolutely concerted choice and an effort. But the other thing is, they get replaced because we don't have time to put chemicals on our lawns one more time. It's our children, it's our pets, it's our lives.
Well, the stubbornness of the landscape industry is a problem, and I can remember your saying in one of the talks that I was able to hear in the past, I think I am saying this correctly, the pay is in the spray. So this is a real problem in overcoming a practice which is harming us, and you've made that clear. One of the questions is, in a perfect world, do we hand weed? Do we smother the weeds? What, it is an ongoing problem. And avoiding the spray is key. So what is your best recommendation? Most of us are not dealing with huge acreages. So we have small areas to deal with.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. So you don't have the same response to every single instance. So
Right.
like if you're talking weeds and lawns, you can outcompete them, and some of them you simply accept. So a biodiverse lawn is a really far more interesting lawn. And to my mind is, why would I put unbelievable amounts of resource and effort into the place that is absolutely of least interest to me? It's not a garden, but it could be sort of gardeny if you let it go. And the more you understand the way to do lawn, it's pretty simple, but I won't like go into it now. It's in our book, which you can download for free, or we'll send you copies. You let your lawn be biodiverse. And so that means largely clover. And if you water it and mow it correctly, it'll balance out in time. I have a little Veronica that comes up in the spring, and it's adorable. It's little blue patches of little blue flowers everywhere. I doesn't bother me one bit. Clover makes sure that your lawn is actually green when turf grasses poop out and when it's hot and humid. So there's that. Under your trees, try soft landings. A lot of those flowers, once they're established, they pretty much will keep weeds out. It's really about choosing the plants that will fill the spaces and that has to do with the plants that are happy for that soil, in that sun, in that climate, and they will thrive. And little by little, they will fill in, and you will have less weeding to do by far. Mulch is not the answer. Mulch means an eternal remulching, because mulch means that there are spaces where weeds could thrive. So the thing is, remove the spaces where weeds can thrive or replace them with something else.
So another question, thank you for that. We do have choices, and we can make better choices. Would you have a suggestion about how to elaborate further, because you already have, increase the attraction in our gardens for good insects, beneficial insects, whether you can see them or not, and discourage the bad ones like lantern flies?
Well, the fact is that the good insects are going to balance it out. Number one, the whole lanternfly thing is tremendously exaggerated. So I know that a lanternfly infestation is gross, right? But it's more the ick factor than anything else. So they've shown, now that it's been around for enough years, there will be a population explosion. And then as long as you do nothing, I mean, you could protect your trees by putting some sticky stuff on them or something. Stomping on life forms to me is like, I can't send children out to stomp on living things. Such as, and they're pretty too. Nature will take care of it. Nature really does. They are the only threat of a lanternfly is to a crop I bet you're not dependent on, which would be grapes or hops.
Okay. One of the points that you made, which I love hearing, is that and a comment was understanding a little bit better that we are just organisms along with everybody else. And how do we help bring about that better form of thinking?
At the risk of sounding really woo-woo, for one thing, like just take a minute in your garden, to just sit there and feel it. Like I don't do it enough. I try to remind myself, wait, before I just dive in and start like doing stuff, could I just take a moment and listen and feel it, feel my feet on the ground, feel myself as like try to like remove my skin and let myself be one with this, because we are just another organism. And we have chosen to place ourselves separate in all of our language. I'm trying to look at everything I write, everything I say that actually sets humans apart. I don't like to use the word stewardship anymore because it implies power imbalance. We are not in charge here. And how can we look at everything as a relationship and a partnership? And that's why we call it landscape therapy. How can I look at my landscape as a relationship, as part of my family? And as much, yes, when my children, are young, yeah, I do have to tell them what to do in order to thrive. But over time, they're going to be on their own. And how can you just work? That to me is key. How can it always be a relationship that sometimes it's telling you what to do?
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. I have one quick final thing. What is the name of your title of your book? And can this program be shared with an Oregon garden club, because they would like to have access to your presentation? So
Absolutely.
those
Yeah.
two.
And the name of it's a pamphlet. I should have had I don't even have one. I'm looking around to see if I have one in arm's reach, but it's nature-based land care, and
Okay.
it's on our website. And as I said, you can download a PDF in English and Spanish, and you can order them on our website as well. And we do have bulk rates. If you're an organization, we can just let us know, and we can work out a bulk rate for you. So, because basically it's not, it's not making us any money. It's really about getting it out there.
So the other thing is this West Lynn Garden Club in Oregon would like to have you show this video, and they're wondering if you would be able to do that.
Fine with me. I believe this is yours, right? So this would be a question for New Canaan Beautification League, but certainly it's fine. It's great for me. As
Okay.
I said, like we're about getting the message out there.
You've been great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I think it was widely enjoyed, and we've learned so much. Thank you very much, Edwina.
You all. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Did you think it was interesting?
Interesting. It was fascinating.
Are we offline now?
No. Are we there, Patricia?
Hello, everyone.
Nancy, go ahead. You may conclude the meeting and I'll stop the recording after you're done.
I'd like, first of all, I thought that presentation was wonderful, and it certainly opened my eyes to new possibilities. I want you all to know that the next program we have will not be on Zoom, but it is open to the public. It will be at the Nature Center on Wednesday, March 5th, and it will be at 9:30 till 11 a.m. And it basically integrates beautifully with the talk that we heard today. The name of that program will be Building for Nature in Your Backyard. And a duo landscapers will be talking to us about the importance of biodiversity and environmental preservation. So if you enjoyed today, here's another take on that. Certainly it connects beautifully. I also like to encourage you to come to our website, which is on your screen right now, and you'll look at, you'll see about us, you'll see our programs, how to join us as a member, the Lee Garden project that we own and maintain, and past news. It's a wealth of information, and I hope that you will all join us in seeking more information about the kinds of topics that would be of interest to you. And some of our past topics are also recorded and on our YouTube channel. With that, I wish you all a lovely day. It looks like the sun is shining and there's no snow, thank goodness. So welcome spring, a month from now. I look forward to that very much.